The state has a duty to protect people at risk. It's as simple as that. So, I try and keep the subjectivity out of it and just look at this objectively. And my view is, if you look at this objectively, Prince Harry should receive state protection.
With the Sussexes returning to the UK, these questions surrounding security and whether or not they should have taxpayer-funded security, so police protection when they are here, still haven't been resolved, it seems. And this has always been one of the big problems Prince Harry has had when it comes to, as he would put it, bringing his family safely back to the UK. He has always argued it simply wouldn't be possible without police protection, purely because they are tapped into intelligence systems. They're allowed to carry weapons, for example. Now, we know that a risk assessment has been carried out, but the outcome of that risk assessment, which looks at a person's vulnerability to threat and the amount of threat they might face, the outcome of that is still unclear. But it's very interesting hearing from Scott Hamer there. He worked for 2 decades with royal security. He worked with the King for 5 years, in the 5 years leading up to the King becoming the King just before the Queen died. He wrote protection policy. He knows this system. He says it's simply unbelievable that a meeting of what's called the Risk Management Board should take months and months. He says it is simply a meeting of, in many cases, 3 people to sit down and discuss this. He makes a very valid point there, and he says that Prince Harry, in admitting that he's had to pay for his own security on recent trips to the UK, is in many ways showing an increased vulnerability, purely because at the moment he will not have armed police with him. Therefore, people can be aware of that. And there remains this very significant risk for him.
I'm here and delighted to be joined by royal journalist Bronte Coy. Bronte, welcome. You're not on holiday, I'm not on holidays, and there's apparently quite a lot to chat about.
Yes, and you're not bitter about it, crucially, I think.
No.
I did enjoy all the backdrops of Greece, though.
Yeah, I was on holiday when people like you and some other publications decided to run a story which went something along the lines of Harry and Meghan are moving back to the UK.
Well, you heard about that
Suddenly
in Greece.
the internet broke.
Yes, it was. Even when I first heard it, I think my brain nearly exploded.
Yeah.
It genuinely, 6 years on from Megxit, is actually still quite staggering to believe.
Yeah, I mean, I did some interviews from my Greek holiday apartment, and somebody referred, one of the first interviews, that's the point at which it's sort of sunk into me, they referred to it as reverse Megxit.
Well, there was some really good ones floating around. I think Regrexit was one of them as well, I heard, which I didn't mind. Meg's in, I think people, when they first heard the news after that initial shock, it was then quickly figure out the best possible way to refer to this moving forward. I think we haven't landed on the perfect one yet, but there's been some great work out there.
So Harry's back, Meg's in, but no, nevertheless, I mean, actually, as we speak right now, they're back in the UK.
That's it.
So actually, a week between we're coming back, suddenly they're here with their kids about to start school. I mean, this has been a wild little ride.
Well, this is it.
7 days.
This is part of what that huge shock was. It was firstly, bang, Harry and Meghan are moving back to the UK. It was enormous to absorb that information. Immediately afterwards, kids are enrolled in school already.
But
then it was, they'll be back within a matter of days.
Yeah.
It was so quick. In fact, this was our reaction, given that the King had only found out a few days earlier himself. You can only imagine he and the rest of the royal family had a similar sort of bang, bang, bang. It's happening.
Right. What? I mean, I imagine that, it's got to be the case that Harry, when he met with Queen Camilla and Meghan at Highgrove during their July visit, surely, and actually, to be fair to all sides, nothing of that meeting is leaked, and that's how it should be. As much as we all wanted to be a fly on the wall and listening to every single word, but nothing is leaked from that. But surely he would have said, hey, Dad, we've got this plan, because we know it's been going on for a few months. Harry and Meghan will be discussing it. There wasn't one thing that led to them coming back to the UK, but a combination, wasn't it? So there's, do we want the kids to continue to go to school in America? Actually, probably not. Do our kids have any connection with the UK, which is where their grandfather is king? Not really. Could they go to British schools? Yes. Do I have a job? We'll come to Meghan's job. That's come up as well. Dad's, health. Okay, it's plateaued, but he's still having cancer treatment. All of these things must have gone into the pot over the last few months, and suddenly, I think it's been referred to me, the stars aligned, and boom, 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 boom. Everything then just falls into place.
That's exactly how it was put to me as well. And it is, you're exactly right about that meeting a month ago. It just sort of beggars belief that this hadn't come up if it was in their mind. But, you know, from all sides, as you say, we've not heard differently. Apparently the king was informed formally about this decision only a few days before the world was. And
that's because their school places weren't confirmed until like the Friday. The king was told on Sunday, so like 2 days after they got the school sorted. And there's another question, like which school's going to say, oh yeah, you're 5th in line to the throne and your kids are 6th and 7th. We don't have any spaces. Sorry, we're full up.
That was exactly, I mean, there's so much to unpack here. But that was one of my first thoughts as well. I think it was described as the great leveller, the waiting for school placements. Yeah. But how can it be a leveller with the 6th and 7th in line to the throne and discussing their placements? Apparently that was the case though. But I think there's, you know, the idea of the king being blindsided, I think this is a very interesting one. A lot of outlets ran with that. But my understanding of this is that Harry has had this as an idea, as actually, I had this. I moved my family overseas after toying with the idea a few years back. But he apparently had an idea.
Okay, I said I would believe it when I saw it. Well, I saw it. So let me say this as plainly as I can. I was wrong. I did not believe Prince Harry and Meghan, Duchess of Sussex, were actually moving back to the UK. I questioned the reports. I questioned the timing. I questioned the logistics. And I said repeatedly that until I saw something concrete, I wasn't buying it. Well, apparently, baby, it's time for me to eat my words. I have now seen footage from a source I trust showing Harry and Meghan arriving at the airport. And unless there's some massive piece of this story I'm missing, it certainly looks like the Sussexes are making their move back to the UK. And I'm not too proud to admit when I got something wrong. I got this one wrong. Period. Now that we're here, my biggest concern is their safety. I genuinely hope Meghan is protected. I hope Archie and Lilibet are protected. I hope whatever security arrangements needed to be made have been handled privately, thoroughly, and without the public knowing every damn detail. Because we don't need to know. Harry and Meghan are grown adults. They know exactly what they've been through. Harry knows his country. Meghan knows exactly what she's walking back into. And I trust them to make the decisions that are right for their family. So if the UK is where the Sussexes have decided they want to build their next chapter, then I wish them nothing but happiness, peace, success, and most importantly, safety. And apparently, I need to add one more thing. Welcome home, Sussexes. I stand corrected. And that's the read. If you like your tea hot, share it, save your seat, and follow for more. This is the Notorious JTB, notoriously opinionated, signing out.
Now, this is where I think ordinary people are looking at this situation and going, hang on, what? Harry, Meghan, and the children are reportedly in Britain temporarily. Fine. Nobody is saying they've moved into Buckingham Palace and started unpacking the silverware. But here's the thing, a temporary stay can still be long enough to raise serious questions about security. Because there's a massive difference between Harry flying into Britain for a quick visit and Harry spending an extended period here with Meghan and their 2 children. The circumstances matter, and that's why I keep coming back to one very simple question. Has the security assessment actually been looked at again? Because according to the situation we're discussing, the arrangement being described sounds very similar to what Harry had during his earlier visit. And that's what makes people scratch their heads. If you're coming for a couple of days, maybe the risk assessment looks one way. But if you're staying for considerably longer, bringing your wife and 2 children with you, and attracting enormous media attention while you're here, surely that deserves another look. That's not some outrageous royal demand. That's common sense. If you were taking your family somewhere and your circumstances suddenly changed, you'd probably reassess things yourself. You'd think about where you're staying. You'd think about how you're traveling. You'd think about your children. You'd think about who's around you. You wouldn't just shrug your shoulders and say, well, it'll probably be fine. Especially when we're talking about someone whose security concerns have been publicly debated for years. And this is where I think the media argument gets lazy. Every time Harry's security comes up, some commentators immediately jump to, but he left royal duties. Okay, but Harry leaving royal duties doesn't erase the fact that he's Harry. It doesn't erase his position. It doesn't erase the threats that have been discussed around him. And it certainly doesn't mean that every trip back to Britain should automatically be treated as though nothing has changed. The question isn't, does Harry deserve VIP treatment? That's not the question. The question is, has the actual level of risk been properly assessed for the circumstances he's in right now? Those are 2 very different things. And let's also remember Meghan and the children are involved. We're not talking about one man traveling alone. There are 2 young children in this family. And whatever anyone thinks about Harry and Meghan, I think most normal people can agree on one thing. You don't mess around when children are involved. At the same time, I'm not suggesting that every detail of their security should be made public. Absolutely not. I don't want journalists announcing exactly where protection is, what routes they're using, where they're staying, or what gaps might exist. That's ridiculous. Security information should be handled carefully. But asking whether the authorities have properly assessed the situation, that's fair. Because Harry and Meghan can want privacy without wanting to put themselves or their children at unnecessary risk. Those 2 things can exist together. They can stay away from royal events, they can keep the children out of the spotlight, they can live privately while they're in Britain, and they can still expect the relevant authorities to take security concerns seriously. So forget the palace drama for a second. Forget William, forget the headlines, forget the endless royal soap opera. Look at this like an ordinary parent. Your family is traveling, your circumstances change, the amount of attention around you changes. Wouldn't you want somebody responsible for your safety to look at the situation again? I certainly would. And that's why the question isn't whether Harry wants special treatment. It's much simpler than that. Harry and his family are in Britain temporarily, but has the security assessment kept pace with the circumstances of that stay? Because if nobody is asking that question, maybe that's the question we should be asking. Now, this is where I think the whole conversation gets twisted, because somehow if Harry and Meghan say, we want privacy, some people hear, we don't need security. Wait, what? Since when did wanting to live your life quietly mean you have to accept every possible risk that comes with it? That's not how normal people think. If anything, most parents want the opposite. You want your family left alone. You don't want strangers taking pictures of your children. You don't want photographers hanging around your house. You don't want every trip to the supermarket turned into a headline. But at the same time, if there's a genuine safety concern, you want somebody making sure your family is protected. Those things are not contradictory. It's like saying, I don't want my neighbors watching me through the window, therefore I don't need a front door. Come on, let's use our heads. Harry and Meghan stepping away from royal duties doesn't mean they've stepped away from being human beings who can have security concerns. And Harry isn't suddenly an ordinary bloke because he decided he didn't want the royal working life anymore. He's still Harry. He's still the king's son. He's still a very recognizable public figure. And he's bringing his family with him when they come to Britain. So when people say, well, they wanted privacy, my response is, yes, privacy from the press does not mean vulnerability to everyone else. There's a difference, a huge difference. Harry and Meghan don't need cameras following them around to prove they're safe. They don't need a palace convoy everywhere they go. They don't need some giant production every time they leave the house. They simply need the appropriate level of protection for whatever level of risk they're facing. That's it. And honestly, I think regular parents understand this immediately. Imagine someone saying, your family wants to keep a low profile, so because of that, you shouldn't worry about security. You'd look at them like they had lost the plot. What does one have to do with the other? Exactly. Privacy is about who gets access to your personal life. Security is about keeping people safe. Different lanes, different problems, different solutions. And this becomes even more important when Archie and Lilibet are involved. These are children. They didn't choose the royal family. They didn't choose the headlines. They didn't choose the arguments between their parents and the institution. They certainly didn't sign up to have every detail of their lives discussed by strangers online. So if Harry and Meghan want to give those children as normal a childhood as possible, I actually think that's completely understandable. Let the kids be kids. Let them go to school. Let them spend time with family. Let them play. Let them grow up without becoming walking content for the British tabloids. And here's the funny part. The same media environment that complains about Harry and Meghan wanting privacy can spend days obsessing over their movements. Where did they land? Where are they staying? What school will the children attend? Who did they meet? When will they see the king? My goodness, at this point, somebody needs to tell the tabloids to drink some water and sit down, because you cannot spend years complaining that Harry and Meghan want attention while simultaneously analyzing their every move. Pick one. Either they're irrelevant, or apparently they're the most interesting people in Britain. You can't have both. And that's why I think the security conversation needs to be separated from the privacy conversation. Harry and Meghan can absolutely say, leave our family alone. And they can also say, we want to make sure our family is safe. There is nothing hypocritical about that. In fact, that's probably what most ordinary families would want. You want peace, you want privacy, you want your children protected, you want to live your life without strangers constantly looking over your shoulder. That's not asking for the moon. That's asking for a normal family life. And Harry doesn't lose the right to safety simply because he chose a different life from the one the palace expected him to live. Walking away from royal duties is one thing. Walking away from every risk attached to your identity, that's not how reality works. So let's stop pretending privacy and protection are opposites. Harry and Meghan don't want a circus. They don't want cameras. They don't want their children turned into royal entertainment. But they absolutely have every reason to want their family safe. And frankly, if asking for that makes somebody think they're having it both ways, well, I'd rather have it both ways than have a family put at unnecessary risk just to satisfy somebody else's idea of what a royal should be. Squaddies, this is where I think the media needs to take a massive step back. Because yes, ask questions. Ask why Harry's security situation is being handled the way it is. Ask whether his family is properly protected. Ask whether the authorities have genuinely considered the risks involved. Those are fair questions. But security is not reality TV. It is not some juicy royal storyline where every little detail needs to be thrown online for everybody to dissect. Because once you start reporting exactly how somebody moves, where they stay, what protection they have, what they don't have, when they're traveling, where their children might be going, at some point you're not informing the public anymore. You're handing out clues. And let's be real, regular people understand this. If your neighbour told the entire street, "I'll be away from home every Tuesday from 9 until 4 and nobody will be there," you'd probably look at them and say, "Mate, maybe don't announce that." Same basic principle. You can demand answers without publishing information that could make somebody less safe. And this becomes even more serious when we're talking about Harry, Meghan, and their children. They have every right to live privately. They have every right to decide how much of their family life they want exposed. And Archie and Lilibet certainly don't need their lives turned into a public treasure hunt. Where are they staying? Which school? What route? Who is protecting them? What car are they using? Who's traveling with them? Come on, why does the public need a minute-by-minute security briefing? We can talk about the bigger issue without turning their lives into a map. And here's the uncomfortable part. Sometimes the media gets so caught up chasing the next headline that basic common sense gets left at the door. The story becomes, Harry has no security. Then another story, Harry has private security. Then another one, here's where the family might be staying. And suddenly everybody is talking about the very information that should probably be handled with the most care. That's not entertainment anymore. That's someone's real life. And imagine being Harry or Meghan reading all this while trying to keep your children safe. You're already dealing with public attention. You're already dealing with strangers analysing your every move. Then you open your phone and see journalists arguing publicly about your protection arrangements. That's got to be unsettling. So yes, hold people accountable. If there are legitimate questions about Harry's security, ask them. If decisions need explaining, explain them. If there are concerns about the safety of his family, don't brush them aside. But don't confuse accountability with giving the whole world a behind-the-scenes tour of somebody's security arrangements. Because there is a huge difference between saying, is Harry being adequately protected, and saying, here's exactly how Harry is protected. One is journalism, the other can become a security problem. And honestly, this isn't even just about royalty. Regular families understand this. You don't post your child's school routine online. You don't announce when your house is empty. You don't tell strangers exactly where you're going to be and when. You use your head. So why should the standard suddenly disappear because the people involved happen to be Harry and Meghan? By all means, scrutinize the decisions, question the authorities, demand transparency where transparency is safe. But when it comes to the nuts and bolts of someone's protection, some things should stay private. Because at the end of the day, this isn't a Netflix episode, it's a family. And if we're genuinely talking about keeping Harry, Meghan, Archie, and Lilibet safe, then maybe the first rule should be pretty simple. Stop turning their security into entertainment. And honestly, this is the part that makes me scratch my head, because look at what Harry and Meghan are doing. They know the attention is coming. They know photographers are watching. They know every little movement can become a headline. And yet somehow they're still managing to keep a lot of their family life private. They aren't standing on some balcony waving a giant flag saying, "Hello everybody, here's our exact location." They're moving carefully, they're keeping things close, they're protecting their children from becoming public property. And good for them. Because if you're a parent, you get it. You don't need to be famous to understand that. You just want your kids to get through the day without strangers knowing their every move. That's normal. That's common sense. And Harry and Meghan seem to understand that very clearly. But here's the bigger question. Why does so much of the responsibility appear to be falling on them? Why should a family have to become experts in avoiding cameras, protecting movements, and keeping information off the internet just to get a little piece? That's where I think the conversation needs to go. Because privacy is one thing, security is another. You can be incredibly careful and still have risks that you simply cannot control. You can change your route. You can keep your location private. You can avoid the cameras. You can tell everybody to mind their own business, which, let's be honest, Meghan probably wouldn't be the only person wanting to say that. But there are still bigger questions about whether the system around them is actually doing enough. And that's not a Harry and Meghan question. That's a common sense question. If a family is receiving this level of public attention, shouldn't the people responsible for assessing security be looking at the situation properly? Not yesterday's situation, not 5 years ago. What's happening now? Because circumstances change. The family has changed. The children are growing up. The public attention hasn't exactly disappeared. And Harry's identity hasn't magically changed because he decided to step away from royal duties. That's the bit people keep missing. Leaving the working royal system doesn't mean Harry suddenly became an ordinary bloke who can walk into Tesco wearing a hoodie and nobody notices. Let's be serious. This is Prince Harry. Put him in a baseball cap and somebody will still be like, "Mate, isn't that Harry?" So yes, Harry and Meghan should absolutely keep doing what they can to protect their privacy, but privacy shouldn't become a substitute for proper security. Those are two different things. And I think regular people understand that better than some of the commentary we've been hearing. You can lock your front door, you can install cameras, you can avoid avoid posting your location, you can tell your children not to share personal information online, but you still expect the wider system to take genuine risks seriously. That's not asking for special treatment, that's asking for basic responsibility. And perhaps that's the real takeaway here. Harry and Meghan have shown that they can protect their private lives remarkably well despite all the noise around them, but they shouldn't have to carry the entire burden themselves. The media needs to stop treating their movements like a scavenger hunt. The public needs to remember that Archie and Lilibet are children, not characters in a royal soap opera, and the institutions involved need to ask the simple question, are we actually doing enough to keep this family safe? Because nobody wants to be having that conversation after something has gone wrong. By then, it's too late. So keep the family private, keep the children protected, keep sensitive information out of headlines, and let Harry and Meghan live their lives without turning every car, doorway, and school run into breaking news. Because honestly, sometimes the best security strategy is simply letting people mind their own business, and that applies to all of us. Thanks for watching, everyone. I'm your host, Miles. And remember, let Harry and Meghan breathe, let the kids enjoy their childhood, and tell the tabloids to put the binoculars down. Until next time, squaddies, stay blessed, stay loud, and I'll catch you in the next episode. God bless you all, and have a beautiful, blessed week.